I think we should clear the air a little bit before we fully dive into all of this. I'm going to give you my thesis statement of sorts right off the bat, right at the beginning. Many of the issues that the hero shooter community is facing right now, like banning certain supports in ranked or the response to the support strike, do not inherently come from places of ill intent. However, I think it would be foolish to say that there is not some sort of bias against women in our community that often stems from deep-rooted misogyny. That is not to say that everyone who wants to ban Mercy or thinks that support is an easy role is inherently misogynistic, but the dogmatic response of the primarily male player base shutting down these concerns from the women in our community and then turning around to make fun of them in the public forum is frankly pretty worrying. Even though I believe that the initial controversy has stemmed from an incredibly vocal minority, I think the much wider backlash to the response that has blown these issues out of proportion has given rise to bad faith discussions surrounding these events. So I would like to hopefully remove much of the generalization around these topics and hold as many people accountable as possible here. And before we truly begin, I want to say that it isn't lost on me that I am a cis white man coming to talk about an issue that primarily revolves around the women in our community. My goal here is to highlight some of the overlooked reasons why the women in our spaces are disproportionately targeted with hate and harassment, and deliver them to my primarily male audience. I think it's also worth noting that I will be highlighting the experiences of specifically women, but I think that a lot of what I have to say applies to other marginalized groups, most specifically the queer community in this case. So please don't feel like I'm leaving you out, I'm just trying to keep this video as focused as possible. Please critique me in the comments. At the end of the day, while I do think this is a struggle that concerns us all, I understand that I am not the one who bears the burden from all of this, so don't just let me make mistakes. I will elaborate and adjust down below if I have to. So before diving into the specifics of what's happened recently, I want to talk about where gender plays a role in multiplayer gaming. Gender is a social construct, and even though some modern liberal thinking likes to pretend we live in a post-gendered world, we don't. I understand I say modern liberal negatively here. I am a self-proclaimed lefty. Ignoring gender is a very similar idea to saying that you don't see color. You are blatantly ignoring real culture and history in order to virtue signal. The aspects of gender, femininity, and masculinity are real, and they do play a part in some of what someone might enjoy or identify with. In gaming, it's no secret that there are genres and roles that more women on average are drawn to. Life sims and self-proclaimed cozy games have higher concentration of women gamers, same with the support category in multiplayer games. I think the lazy conclusion to draw here is that there are games that are inherently feminine or made specifically for women to enjoy. That, I think, is a perfect example of correlation not exactly equaling causation. A little bit of context is required before diving into the weeds because there is some history to get in here, so bear with me for a second, okay? Video games at their inception, and more importantly, released to the public, were, for the most part, family-friendly. Mainly due to the scarcity and high price, getting a video game console to be successful had to come with an appeal to the masses. Much like home television sets in the 50s, game consoles were supposed to be a social family experience. A classic example are the toys that work with the NES, the Zapper which was bundled in, and Rob. Sure, most games that were popular were single player, but the novelty of it all pushed past this. Sitting around the TV, watching your family play, fighting over who gets to play next, this is how video games could succeed. It's a similar formula to how arcade cabinets were so popular. Yet by the 90s, video games were no longer novel to the general population. They felt like toys from a previous decade rather than a hip new thing. So marketing surrounding the SNES and Genesis generation of consoles definitely took a turn into a more niche market. Young boys. The SNES was not the console your mom could pick up and try to stumble her way through Mario 1-1. It would pile drive her into the dirt. Sonic was so fast on Genesis that Grandma's heart stopped when she saw him. Framing video games as epic or rad very clearly swerved the generation towards toys for boys. And this sentiment would prevail for decades, only turning back towards a broader audience in the last generation or so. Not to say that there weren't efforts along the way to get women and girls to play games, but there was a stark difference. Prestige, mainstream, big-budget AAA games were the ones targeted at boys mostly, while the ones targeted at girls were lower budget, typically based on traditionally gendered activities like fashion, housework, and other general family-based tasks. While there were plenty of titles that were marketed to families or kids with no real gender bias, the ones specifically designed to get more girls playing games were centered around gender stereotypes. Boys can experience all these fantasy scenarios, play all of these labor of love titles, while girls were getting gamified versions of one of the only 3 things a 45-year-old dude in the 2000s could come up with for what women liked. Nothing is saying that young girls couldn't play the big, important games, but navigating gender expression and identity as a child in the 90s and 2000s was not as easy or understood. Children typically stuck to what was aimed at them because that's what they knew. It goes both ways. If I were to try and play a fashion game as a kid, I would have gotten eaten alive by the other boys. I did play one, by the way. It's called Pokemon X and Y. Ultimately, this shift would alienate lots of young girls and women away from video games, and the less number of women playing games would further reinforce the idea socially that games were for boys. So as gaming matured and expanded into more competitive multiplayer fronts, the overwhelming majority of players ended up being men and would continue to be for years up until very recently. And I think this is where probably the single most widespread misogynistic gamer idea stems from. Women just aren't good at games. From a logical standpoint, there is nothing that would prevent women from being just as good as men at video games. Yet some people would point to the ratio of professional male gamers to female gamers being so male skewed and use that as a gotcha counterpoint. But remember, correlation does not equal causation. I want to ask you the question, how exactly do you get good at a video game? The answer is simple. Years and years of good constructive practice. As we talked about earlier, it's a more recent development that women are deciding to play video games, so maybe they don't have that time requirement. Maybe. But to be honest, I just don't buy that excuse. More realistically, you need to get good practice consistently. And what does that require? A community of other good players. An accepting community that is willing to help you and ultimately push you to be your best. Does a community of mostly men who spent the majority of their youth in discords and chat forums sound like a welcoming space to women? The truth is that in our community, there is a high likelihood to run into hostile environments as a woman, and even if you wanted to tough it out, often it's not a space designed for you to succeed. Lots of men in our community are insecure, would not take a woman trying to get better seriously, and would refuse to allow them to get good practice. I've seen this with my own eyes at Smash and fighting game tournaments over the years. You may have the drive and the ability to be the best at your game, but you are overwhelmingly unlikely to reach your potential when much of the community does whatever they can to get in your way. And that's just talking about more organized environments. In theory, online matchmaking should be a much better gateway. But of course, the anonymous nature of online gaming makes navigating the landscape an absolute nightmare as a woman. When there are no real consequences to what you say, the floodgates of misogyny are opened. It's easy to sit there and just say, turn off chat. But that is yet another added hurdle that men don't have to face. The truth is that men are privileged in this space. Based on the experiences of plenty of the women I know who are involved in esports, I wouldn't be surprised if all of this was the root cause of why there is a larger portion of women who focus on casual gaming and not push for competition. Community is important for multiplayer games, and the environment is substantially more inviting at lower levels where competition isn't the priority. There's sort of a catch-22 here, where women aren't taken as seriously for not competing and performing at higher levels, but are then disrespected and dismissed when they are good at their games and do try to compete. There is no winning here. Women are just not allowed to play these games peacefully. I don't think the broader picture I've painted is entirely true. There are women at all levels of play in these games, far more than you probably think there are, and I also think that things are probably changing for the better. The hero shooter community has figures like SK, Aspen, OC, Aramori, and many others that provide a welcoming space for women and queer people, proving that there is obviously a space for everyone. The more women and non-misogynists who join the community, play, and be vocal, can harbor a positive environment that allows us to push each other to be the very best possible, and I think that a lot of these stereotypes I've talked about can be overcome. That is if we stop doing this shit. Okay, time to talk about the actual stuff that sparked this video, and I want to start with hero bans in Overwatch. I'm sure you've seen a tweet or a YouTube video with the title like, I guess banning heroes is misogynistic now, and have probably reacted to like, what? the hell is this guy talking about? Editing lane here, I need to jump in real quick. I'm about to talk about a Twitter account, and she has her pronouns in her bio. Now, when I wrote and filmed this, I didn't double check. That's bad on me. I thought that one of them was they, so I referred to her as they through a lot of when I talk about her. That's on me. I should have double checked. Sorry about that. Sorry for the confusion, but just know going forward, that is what I mean. From what I can tell, most of these hysterical responses stem from this quote tweet off a Mr. Zetis tweet that says, "Low-key think this ban list is rooted in misogyny, but I'll be jumped if I say that." This tweet was wildly blown out of proportion, causing some of the worst, stupidest people in the community crawling out of the woodwork to dunk on them. There are plenty of examples to choose from, but I am specifically going to point out this absolutely horrific video from this channel, Greed EU, because it has over 10K views at the time of writing, and I find that to be frankly alarming. Now, I would not typically talk about this kind of stuff, bring up another creator, insinuate what I think a lot of people are going to see as drama, but I think in this specific instance, I kind of do have to talk about this because he brings up a laundry list of common talking points around this tweet. And frankly, I don't think that this kind of stuff is acceptable to make or watch even. So please allow me to be the one who had to suffer through this video. Just stay away from it entirely, okay? Ignoring the fact that he and many others take the stupid tweet on the stupid tweet website at complete face value, he brings up the common sentiment that the logic of the tweet should carry on for other characters in the cast. He jokingly remarks about banning Tracer meaning you're homophobic, or that banning Sombra makes you racist. Yet he then goes on to look at their profile, see that they have pronouns listed, calls them the R slur, decides to refer to them as dumb fuck instead, makes fun of the people who eventually call him out on this, calls the op mentally ill, then invalidates their opinion because their profile has porn on it. This guy and the many others doing these types of attacks or pushing these points are unknowingly proving her point. I think the majority of us understand that inherently banning a character or a group of them is not inherently misogynistic or racist or homophobic. It's all purely for the purpose of creating a better gameplay environment, whether the bans actually succeed in that or not. The problem comes with the showboating of it, the harassment of the players, mostly women, who feel bad when their character is target banned. The humiliation ritual they get sent through in the public forum. When these players speak up or voice their concerns, in a joking manner or not, so many of these men in our community take this as an open invitation to ridicule them. You can be relieved or even excited to be able to ban a character that you don't like, but when that becomes part of your personality for a while, it's just openly antagonistic. I personally don't have an allegiance with any one character. I'll play what I need to play, but imagine you go on Twitter and all you see is people celebrating the removal of the one character that you like to play. It kind of sucks. It can feel helpless, like a me versus them scenario. And I think it's easy to see the frustration there. Remember how important community is for these games and how bad it probably feels to have a large section of that community turn against you. But if you say something about it, you unknowingly open the world up to mock and belittle you, even if you are just a Joe Schmo who doesn't have a following at all. Hero bans are the catalyst of this right now, but the communities for characters like Mercy and Moira seem to always be under attack. I have seen Twitter get up in arms about plenty of heroes, from Widow to Hog to Soj, but only ever the characters associated with female communities have to deal with this extra hate. I think there's a much larger conversation to be had about the place of hero bans or eliminating certain playstyles, expectations set from the past 9 years, and changing characters to better keep up with the modern game with transferable skills, but we are not mature enough for that right now. Instead, we have to sit these dudes down and explain to them in as plain detail as possible that they are dunking on a marginalized group just to turn around and go 2-7 and low gold tonight. You really got him, champ. Keep on. Keep it up. The other current subject to talk about is the support strike in Marvel Rivals. Full disclosure, I don't play Rivals anymore. I haven't played it since like January. I don't know if this has had any actual traction. My gut tells me no, but I have been keeping up with this from afar. I think we have a very similar situation here, just on a broader scale. Support in Rivals specifically is often seen as an easy role by the people who don't play it, and as someone who has played a lot of support in Rivals, I don't know if I can disagree. But here's the thing. It really doesn't matter either way. That's not what this is about. Support players, many of which are women leading the charge here, are upset about how they are being treated by the community at large. Because support is seen as the easiest, and since helping others is baked into the identity of the role, it's incredibly easy to default to supports being the issue. This is not a Rivals exclusive problem, but with so many people being new to the genre, they just don't understand the idea that maybe they were playing poorly or that they were in a bad spot doing a stupid thing, and that's why they died. But they don't have the awareness yet and aren't skilled enough to identify what is actually required of them. So the logical step is to say, well, I wasn't getting help, so it must be the role that helps me that's the problem. Most of the time, they don't even realize they were actually getting help the whole time. Healing also being as powerful as it is in Rivals exacerbates this problem, because now you assume that you'll never ever die because of the power of that role. So when your 1 in 5 Spider-Man player who solo dives a backline and blows up every fight gets on mic to complain, and then they hear the voice of a woman, the dominoes just kind of fall into place for them. Due to a widespread lack of understanding and a lot of insecurity complexes, it would kill some of these guys if they admitted that a woman in their rank is, shocker, the same rank as them, or maybe better than they are. Newsflash to these guys, but when you're on the same team, the goal you both share is to work together. Only one party is holding their weight, and I'll tell you, it is not the one telling the other to go back to the kitchen. Motherfucker, you gotta get back to the kitchen. Your mom just asked you to do the dishes for the 5th time today, and she's gonna make you start paying rent and get a job if you don't. The support player base as a whole is blamed, but when you look at who is taking the brunt of the harassment, it's women. It always is. The quote-unquote support strike is a way to send a message about how they want to be treated. It was never about the role being bad or anything like that. It's about basic respect for your teammates. When I see a large content creator come after the support role quite broadly and unfairly, and then get pushback from it, the results seem to always be the same. The creator is never the one at fault and deflects all the criticism. The women complaining are making a whole big stink about it, and then those women are now dealing with 10 times the wrath from the misogynistic members of the community. There's just no accountability here. I'm not saying that how these things start is malignant in nature, but sitting back and watching the wolves descend while you're getting rightfully criticized just doesn't really sit well with me. And of course, this just allows misogynists to run wild because somehow the bad guys in this situation are the women who wanted to be treated better. It's kind of funny because when you say the phrase support strike, it sounds a little absurd. Strikes are inherently political, and trying to contextualize that in a multiplayer video game just sounds funny. I can't lie. But when you take a step back and you look at the big picture here, I think the larger point becomes clear as day. This isn't about proving that support is hard or whatever. It's an organized effort to take back the respect that they absolutely deserve. Sometimes it can feel like they're the only ones with real backbones in this community. These specific topics are not where these conversations started, and they will be far from where they end, but I don't want to let them slip through our fingers. Supporting all members of our community, regardless of how they choose to enjoy these games, is vital to creating a healthy, welcoming space. This is important, and the sooner that we recognize that, the sooner that we can do something about it. For too long, the solution to getting around misogyny was to ignore it. Women are told that they are too sensitive or can't take a joke because it's just always something they have to deal with, and the men just allow this to happen. The hero shooter community is not going to solve sexism, but we can make strides to make our space the safest and most welcoming that it can be. Speaking to my male viewers out there, it can be easy to know that you aren't sexist and then think that nothing that you do, or don't do for that matter, can be either. But the roots of misogyny are deep and ingrained in our communities and our everyday lives, and the reality is that this post-gendered bias world just isn't true. You are not immune to hidden bias and misogyny. I certainly am not either. It is our job to recognize where we are flawed and make active strides to fix our mistakes and prevent others from making them in the future. We need to fight back against sexism in our lobbies. We need to be welcoming and encouraging for however they like to play. We need to recognize that they are just here to play the video game, same as you and me. And we need to do everything that we can to allow them the same experience that we are afforded all the time. It is not just their fight, it is absolutely ours too. I don't have an outro written here, but I think I really wanted to get this video out a little closer to when this stuff was happening a lot, but this is really important. I put a lot of projects on hold to write and rewrite and edit this script because I wanted to get it just right. I think it's really, really important. And I did put a lot of effort into this. Now, this video was not monetized. I felt a little weird doing that kind of stuff, but I do, obligatory YouTube stuff. If you want to continue to support me, I do really appreciate that. The best stuff that you can do, just like and subscribe. As always, if you want to go above and beyond, you can go to my Twitch, twitch.tv/LaneHemingway, give me a follow, maybe give me a sub, I suppose. If you really want to help, again, memberships on this channel are a good way to do that. I don't post very often, but they are there in case you just want to help me out. I do really appreciate it. I am back, right? This is the first video coming back. I know this is not the one I wanted to come back with, but I think it was important enough that I had to. Next up in the pipeline, probably the Nintendo Switch video, a couple of other projects. I'm going on vacation here this week, so I'll be a little behind. I say behind, there's no deadlines. I'm not behind on anything. What am I saying? But yeah, just don't expect it super quick, but it'll be coming soon. I'm excited about that one. That was a really fun time. But yeah, I'm not going to ramble very long. Thank you guys so much. Please be nice out there. Be kind, step up, do your part. Yeah. Thank you guys. Peace out.